General Hospital spoilers tease that Willow is ready to sever every lingering thread that connects her to Drew Kane. The man she once tried to defend, once tried to believe in, has become unrecognizable to her. His betrayal, layered and personal, has cut deeper than any wound she thought she could endure. She no longer wishes to fight for control, for love, or for illusions. What she wants now is distance. What she wants is silence. She wants to return to something resembling her former life, a version of peace that once existed in the home she shared with Michael Corinthos and the children. But that dream, like so many others, may have already turned to ash. Willow stood outside the familiar Corinthos estate for what felt like hours. The house was still the same, the garden trimmed, the lights warm behind curtained windows, but everything that had once made it feel like home was gone. She wasn't here to beg for her place back. Not anymore. All she wanted now was the chance to visit the children, to see their faces, to be reminded that some part of her still mattered. Her heart clenched at the thought of Wiley's smile, Amelia's tiny hands gripping her finger. She wasn't their mother by blood, but she had been their home. And she needed to feel that again, even just for a moment. But Michael didn't see her as family anymore. When he opened the door and saw her standing there, he didn't flinch. His face turned hard with anger, his eyes sharp and unwavering. Willow could barely get a word out before he cut her down with the truth he had been holding back for too long. "I know what you did to Daisy and Sasha," Michael said, his voice low but volatile. "I know you were behind their nightmares. I know why they left." Willow's lips parted in stunned silence. Her legs nearly gave way beneath her. How could he know? That secret, buried under layers of manipulation and shame, was supposed to be locked away. Only one person had been close enough to uncover the truth. Drew. Of course. Of course it had been Drew. He must have told Michael everything. Not because he cared about justice or healing, but because he wanted to punish Willow. Humiliate her. Turn the last remaining person in her life against her. The man she had once trusted had turned her into a ghost in her own story. Willow tried to explain, her voice hoarse, her hands trembling, but Michael wouldn't let her speak. His fury was palpable. "I don't want you here," he said. "I don't want you near me. Or the kids. You're not the woman you used to be, Willow. You're something else now. And I don't want my family anywhere near it." With that, he shut the door. Willow didn't cry. The tears wouldn't come. She walked without thinking, feet dragging across the sidewalk, breath shallow in her chest. Her legs moved through habit, not direction. Her body was numb. And when she finally looked up, she was standing in front of Drew's house. It felt like the only logical place to go, the eye of the storm. Her pain needed a face, a body, something to blame, and Drew had provided that and more. She pounded on the door, hands balled into fists, her rage finally boiling to the surface. When Drew opened the door, he was calm. Too calm. As if he had known this moment was coming. "I know what you did," Willow spat, her voice shaking with fury. "You told Michael. You destroyed what little I had left." Drew didn't deny it. He simply stepped back, inviting her in with the chill of a man who had stopped caring long ago. "You did that to yourself," he said. "I just gave him the truth." Willow stepped into the house, her body trembling. Her mind raced. She imagined hitting him, ending this pain by forcing it out of her body and into his. For a moment, she wanted to hurt him as deeply as he had hurt her. But Drew saw it in her eyes. He stepped back, tense but poised, his guard fully up. He wasn't going to be caught off guard. Willow's fingers twitched at her sides, but her limbs refused to move. The moment passed, and she realized she couldn't go through with it. Not because Drew didn't deserve it, but because she didn't want to become what he already believed she was. Without another word, she turned and walked away, this time with no destination. Her body carried her to Liz's doorstep, and it was there finally, inevitably, that everything began to collapse. Willow barely made it through the door. Her knees buckled, her body crumpled forward, and Liz caught her just in time before she hit the floor. Alarmed, Liz gently guided her to the couch, whispering reassurances and grabbing a blanket. Willow's skin was clammy, her pulse faint, and then, without warning, she vomited. At first, Liz thought it was stress, pure exhaustion from the weeks of emotional wreckage. But as she wiped Willow's forehead and watched her sleep, something familiar settled into her mind. The signs were all there. Nausea, fatigue, emotional instability. She had seen this before. It wasn't just exhaustion. It was something else. Liz went to the pharmacy the next morning and returned with a pregnancy test. She waited in silence until Willow stirred from her sleep. When Willow opened her eyes, confusion swirled before the memories returned, and along with them, pain. Liz didn't speak at first. She just placed the box gently on the coffee table. "I think you should take this," she said. Willow stared at it, the meaning clicking into place. She didn't argue. She rose without a word, took the test, and walked to the bathroom. Minutes passed. Then the door creaked open, and Willow stepped out, holding the stick like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Positive. She sat down slowly, staring at nothing. Her mind spun with fragmented thoughts: Michael's rejection, Drew's betrayal, the crumbling of every support system she had left. And now this. A child. A new life growing inside her, at the worst possible time, under the worst possible circumstances. Liz spoke gently. "You don't have to decide anything right now. You're safe here." But Willow's mind was already spinning. She couldn't stay in Port Charles. Not now. Not while carrying Drew Kane's child. She wouldn't allow him to know, wouldn't allow him to have a say, wouldn't allow this child to be dragged into a war that should have ended long ago. That night, while Liz slept in the other room, Willow slipped out. She left no note, no message. Just silence. The next morning, Liz found the couch empty, the blanket folded, the test gone. She searched everywhere. Called everyone. But Willow was gone. Vanished like a shadow. No one knew where she had gone, but rumors would circulate. Some claimed she took a train out of town. Others believed she checked into a private clinic under a false name. No one could confirm anything. What they didn't know was that Willow had made a choice. To keep the child. To raise it far from Port Charles, far from the legacy of lies, control, and pain. She would build a life from the pieces left to her, and this time, she wouldn't ask for permission or forgiveness. She would become something new. And for the first time in a long while, the future didn't feel like a punishment. It felt like a chance. Willow had disappeared without a trace. Days passed, then weeks, and Port Charles slowly resumed its rhythm, though a few people still whispered her name in hushed tones. Liz remained silently haunted, retracing every step that might have hinted at where Willow had gone. She went through every contact Willow had, visited the hospital records in case she had been admitted under a different name, but it was as if Willow had evaporated into the wind. Alexis, who had caught wind of Willow's disappearance through Liz, privately feared the worst, especially considering Willow's emotional state and the early stages of pregnancy. But Alexis kept quiet, choosing not to involve the police, respecting Willow's right to vanish if that was what she needed. Drew, on the other hand, remained disturbingly indifferent. He neither inquired nor acknowledged Willow's absence. In the quiet corners of his estate, he kept to his shadows, lost in his schemes and vendettas. Scout had left him, Michael had turned his back, and now Willow had vanished. What little humanity Drew once clung to had been hollowed out, replaced by an obsessive drive to exert control, to punish, to dominate. But the cracks were forming. Scout, now under the guardianship of Alexis, had begun to thrive again. Her schoolwork improved, she engaged with her peers, and most importantly, she found comfort in a home where she was heard and protected. Alexis filed the necessary paperwork to take legal custody, and given Drew's recent history, including the damning evidence Scout had provided, the courts responded swiftly. A restraining order was issued, and Drew was barred from seeing Scout until the matter could be reviewed in court. He didn't fight it. Whether from arrogance or distraction, he didn't even show up to the first hearing. This only deepened Alexis's concern. Drew was spiraling, and he was doing so quietly, methodically, dangerously. The documents Scout had given her revealed more than simple corporate corruption or financial crime. There were threads leading to blackmail, coercion, and even manipulation of medical records at General Hospital. And at the center of some of those threads was Willow. Alexis began to connect the dots. It wasn't a coincidence that Willow had run from Drew right after discovering she was pregnant. She had confided in no one except Liz, and Drew's sudden coolness about the entire situation made Alexis suspect he might already know about the baby. If he knew, how? And worse, what would he do with that knowledge? Meanwhile, Willow had made her way to a small, coastal town miles away from Port Charles. She found refuge in a modest cottage owned by a kindly retired couple who rented the space with no questions asked. She introduced herself under a different name and took a part-time job at a local bookshop, something peaceful and detached from her former life. As the weeks passed and her belly began to grow, she found herself talking to the baby during quiet evenings, not out of desperation but out of a slowly rekindling hope. She imagined a life where the child would never know the toxic legacy of Drew Kane. A life of simplicity, of choice, of healing. Still, the past clung to her like a shadow. She couldn't entirely erase the memories: Michael's rejection, Drew's betrayal, Liz's compassion. She often dreamed of Scout, wondered if the young girl had found the strength to break free, and hoped she had someone who believed her. Willow had failed her in many ways. She had chosen silence when she could have intervened. But she wouldn't fail this child. Back in Port Charles, Michael had begun to question his decision to shut Willow out so completely. The rage that once clouded his judgment began to lift, leaving behind a hollow sense of loss. Wiley asked about Willow more frequently. Amelia, though still young, seemed to recognize something was missing. Michael remembered the good parts of his relationship with Willow: the way she read bedtime stories, her laughter, her resilience during illness. He couldn't forgive everything, not yet, but he began to doubt whether pushing her away had been the right thing. Sasha returned to town around this time, unaware of everything that had happened in her absence. She had healed during her time away and came back stronger, more centered. She visited Michael to catch up, and during their conversation, Willow's name came up. Sasha frowned but didn't react with anger. Instead, she said something that struck a chord with Michael: sometimes people act out because they've lost themselves. But losing someone doesn't always mean they're gone for good. Those words echoed in Michael's mind. Later that evening, he asked Alexis if she had any idea where Willow might be. She didn't, but the fact that Michael asked gave her pause. Maybe it was time to look again. In a twist no one expected, Drew began showing signs of unraveling. He stopped attending business meetings, started making erratic decisions with Aurora Media, and isolated himself more and more. Rumors began to spread through Port Charles. Some whispered that he had developed a dependency on medication. Others claimed he had begun communicating with questionable figures from his past, perhaps looking for allies to defend against the mounting legal threats. Alexis wasn't content to watch. She called a private investigator, a trusted ally from years ago, to quietly look into Drew's recent activities. What came back was alarming. He had been seen visiting a medical research facility tied to a now-defunct project known for experimental treatments, one of which had reportedly affected memory and behavior. If Drew had subjected himself to such procedures, that could explain the drastic shift in his personality, his coldness, even his violence. But it also meant he was unpredictable. And then came the envelope. Mailed without a return address, it arrived at Alexis's home one rainy morning. Inside was a single photograph, grainy but unmistakable. Willow, pregnant, walking into a clinic. The date stamped on the corner was only a week old. Alexis's breath caught. Someone knew. Someone had found her. She immediately called Michael and showed him the image. His face drained of color. That was the confirmation he never expected, and it hit him hard. Not only had Willow survived, she had been protecting something. Someone. "Do you think it's Drew's?" he asked. "I don't know," Alexis said carefully. "But I wouldn't be surprised if he already suspects. And if he does, he'll go after her." Michael's jaw clenched. For the first time in weeks, his focus sharpened. He had lost Willow once. He wasn't going to let Drew take anything more. The hunt began quietly. Michael and Alexis worked together, tracing the postmark, finding the clinic, and confirming that Willow had been there but had already left again. It became a game of shadows. But this time, they weren't the only ones playing. Drew had intercepted a copy of the same photograph. He made no calls, no threats. But he packed a small bag, took cash, and disappeared from Port Charles with no explanation. By the time Michael and Alexis tracked down Willow's new location, the cottage she had been living in was empty. The landlord said she had left a few days prior without warning. Her things were gone. No forwarding address. Just a faint memory of a woman who spoke softly and read poetry to her unborn child in the evenings. She was running again. But this time, not just from the past, she was running because she knew someone was coming. The question was whether it would be the man who wanted to destroy her, or the man who might still want to save her.